Thank you very much. Warm welcome to those of you who are attending from Ghana, and to those of you who have come here from other places, I join my welcome. Akwaba. Mr. William Kobet, Director of Cities Alliance, Mr. Emmanuel Ajekum, Honorable Deputy Minister for Local Government and Rural Development, Excellency Mr. Julius Debras, Honorable Chief of Staff, Cabinet, Mr. Jean-Pierre Elong Mbasi, Secretary General, the United Cities Local Governments Africa, representatives of governments, civil society, the media, academia, and development partners, board members, and friends of Cities Alliance. I'm really glad that we have this opportunity to be here together. I think that Cities Alliance has gathered an impressive assembly of policymakers and researchers and representatives of civil society that share a passion, for making our cities better places to live and to work. I think as you remember, it was a year ago this month that heads of state adopted the Sustainable Development Agenda in New York. It sets out our shared ambitions to end extreme poverty, to protect the planet, and to transform our economies, all at the same time. And it spells out important ambitions for our cities. Its unified agenda for social, economic, and environmental development encompasses 17 mutually dependent goals. They are mutually dependent because we really cannot achieve economic growth without having sustainable growth. We need to have inclusive governance in order to make sure that growth ends poverty. And we cannot pursue growth at the expense of curtailing the options for our grandchildren, to be able to solve their problems. And I think that much of this workshop pertains very directly to Sustainable Development Goal 11, which calls for inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable cities. I'm aware that Cities Alliance, UN Habitat, many governments and civil society organizations lobbied very hard to have cities as a specific goal in the Agenda 2030. And I think that these experts and the advocates could have said that it was enough to have cities in the other 16 goals, where we look at empowering women in cities, greening cities, governance of cities, but that really wouldn't be enough. Considering that half our population already lives in cities, that this share is growing, and that most of the people in cities now do not have decent housing, decent jobs, and adequate basic services. So these other goals are relevant and they're necessary, but we needed a specific goal on cities. The agenda for this workshop seems to me to capture the essential feature of SDG 11 on cities, that meeting a very complex interdisciplinary goal requires us to learn more about how to take a coordinated approach. The pursuit of resilient, inclusive, safe, sustainable cities engages all levels of government, national, regional, municipal, and community. And it requires coherence across a wide range of policy areas. The SDG 11 targets for cities encompass safe and affordable housing, basic services, slum upgrading, transportation, health, air quality and waste management, resilience to withstand severe weather and natural disasters, and as a necessary condition for meeting that ambitious list, there is a specific target on participatory planning and management. This also benefits from a regional commitment as expressed in the Agenda 2063. Recognizing mutual dependency across policy areas is not a weakness. Synergies and cooperation can be an enormous source of strength. Having a shared vision, an understanding of what each part of government and each part of civil society and each development partner has to do, and how they can act in concert to achieve a shared vision, offers us some enormous potential. I think that we are called upon to organize our institutions and resources and accountability mechanisms to make it easier to realize that potential. There is no silo approach to achieving the Agenda 2030 in general and to achieving SDG 11 on cities in particular. Whether you think of it as coordination or sequencing or harmonization, what's important is that it comes down to recognizing mutual dependency. That's when we share a vision, when each of us realize that this vision cannot be achieved without our expertise and our actions, but when we know just as well that it cannot be achieved by us alone. Who the us is in this equation is very important. SDG 11 on cities exemplifies the human rights foundation of the Agenda 2030. It's about making cities inclusive as well as resilient and sustainable. That's why there are specific targets about upgrading slums and about making cities work for everyone who lives in them. The United Nations is clear that the right to adequate housing is a human right, and it extends to slum dwellers. It is not limited by property rights. The right to adequate housing is about living in security, peace, and dignity, and SDG 11 is about securing this right for everyone. The UN Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing has recognized the growing role of mayors, other city officials, and civic and human rights, non-government organizations, and community-based organizations in securing the right to housing. Preparations for the upcoming Habitat 3 in Ecuador next month have embraced the transformative potential of human rights as a necessary framework for inclusive, vibrant, and sustainable cities. And it is placing a high priority on meeting the human rights of minorities, the homeless, people with disabilities, those living in extreme poverty, and those who have experienced displacement and evictions. When we talk about resilient and inclusive cities in the same breath or in the same goal, it is because we recognize that we need both physical infrastructure and social infrastructure. It is not only about what we plan to do, but who is involved in the planning, and then about who is implementing those plans and benefiting from them. I think there is every potential in Accra that it will be looked to across the region for how well government institutions and civil society, the private sector, and development partners pull together for resilient and inclusive development. And I hope that His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, in his role as co-chair of the group of eminent advocates for the SDGs that was set up by the UN Secretary General at the end of last year, that in this role he will be able to point out the effective coordination in achieving SDG 11 in Ghana, and point to this as one of Ghana's models for attaining Agenda 2030 across Africa. So it's with that end in mind that I hope that throughout the next 3 days, this workshop sharing of experience and research and policy innovations will help all of us in Ghana achieve our ambitions for inclusive, resilient, safe, and sustainable cities. And I hope that it will prove equally transformative in the cities that you come from and go back to at the end of the week. Thank you so very much.